Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he looked at the green readouts on his tablet. The atmospheric processor hummed quietly behind him, converting the thin air of Kepler 442c into something humans could breathe. He had been working alone on this planet for 3 months now, and the silence was starting to get to him. The planet was supposed to be empty. The survey said so. No intelligent life, just rocks and sparse plants that looked like purple grass. Jake's job was simple: set up the machines that would make the air breathable for future colonists. Then move to the next site and do it all over again. He packed his tools into his backpack and started walking toward the next checkpoint. The crystalline forest ahead sparkled in the orange light of the alien sun. The trees were not really trees at all, but tall structures that looked like glass spears reaching toward the sky. They made soft chiming sounds when the wind blew through them. Jake had walked this path many times before, but today something felt different. He heard a sound that did not belong. It was weak and pitiful, like a kitten crying for its mother. He stopped and listened carefully. There it was again. Following the sound, Jake pushed through the crystal formations until he found a small clearing. What he saw there made him freeze. A small creature lay on its side near a broken crystal pillar. It was about the size of a house cat, but unlike any animal Jake had ever seen. The creature had scales that shimmered like jewels in the sunlight. They were mostly silver, but flashes of blue and green danced across its body when it moved. It had 4 legs, each ending in tiny claws, and a long tail that curled around its body. Its head was somewhere between a cat and a lizard, with large amber eyes that looked up at Jake with obvious pain and fear. Blood seeped from a deep cut along the creature's side. Jake could see that it was very thin, probably starving. Its breathing was quick and shallow. If he did nothing, the small being would die soon. Jake knew the rules. Do not interact with alien life forms. Report any contact immediately. Wait for the science team to arrive. But looking at the suffering creature, Jake found he could not follow those rules. He was not the kind of man who could walk away from something that needed help. Moving slowly, Jake knelt down near the creature. It tried to crawl away, but was too weak. Jake spoke softly, the way he would to a scared animal back on Earth. "Easy there, little one. I am not going to hurt you." The creature's eyes followed his movements as Jake carefully opened his medical kit. He had basic supplies for treating human injuries, but he hoped they would work on alien biology too. He cleaned the wound with antiseptic solution, trying to be as gentle as possible. The creature whimpered, but did not try to bite or scratch him. Jake used medical tape to close the worst part of the cut. It was not perfect, but it would stop the bleeding. The creature seemed to understand that he was trying to help. Its breathing slowed down a little. Next came the question of food. Jake opened his emergency rations and broke off small pieces of the protein bar. He offered them to the creature, holding them out on his palm. At first, it just stared at the food. Then hunger won over fear, and it carefully took the pieces with its small mouth. The creature ate everything Jake offered. Its eyes brightened a little, and it seemed stronger already. Jake gave it water from his canteen, dripping it slowly so the creature could drink without choking. "What are you, little guy?" Jake asked quietly. The creature tilted its head, almost as if it was trying to understand his words. Its amber eyes were remarkably intelligent. Jake had the strange feeling that there was a sharp mind behind those eyes. Jake decided to call the creature Spark because of the way its scales caught and reflected light. As the alien sun began to set, Jake realized he could not leave Spark alone in the wilderness. Predators might find it, or the wound might get infected. He made a decision that would have horrified his supervisors. Jake carefully picked up Spark, surprised by how light the creature was. Spark tensed for a moment, then relaxed in his arms. Jake could feel the creature's heart beating fast against his chest. Jake carried Spark back to his temporary camp near the atmospheric processor. He set up a small shelter using his emergency supplies, making a comfortable bed for the injured creature. Spark curled up in the makeshift nest, its tail wrapped around its body. Over the next few days, Jake fell into a routine. He would do his work on the atmospheric processors, checking readings and making adjustments. But every few hours, he would return to check on Spark. He shared his food and water, and slowly the creature grew stronger. Spark proved to be remarkably intelligent. It watched everything Jake did with obvious interest. When Jake dropped a tool, Spark would pick it up and bring it back to him. When Jake worked on equipment, Spark would sit nearby, its head tilted as if trying to understand the technology. The creature began following Jake around the worksite. It moved with grace and quiet steps, never getting in the way, but always staying close. Jake found himself talking to Spark as he worked, explaining what he was doing, even though he knew the creature could not understand him. Or could it? Sometimes, Jake caught Spark reacting to his words in ways that seemed too smart for a simple animal. When Jake said food, Spark would look toward his supply pack. When Jake said water, Spark would glance at the canteen. It was probably just coincidence, but Jake was not so sure. As the days passed, Jake realized he was growing attached to his small companion. The loneliness that had been eating at him disappeared. Having another living being around, even an alien, one made the empty planet feel less hostile and cold. But Jake knew this situation could not last forever. Soon his supervisor would contact him for a status report. Eventually, other humans would come to this site. What would happen to Spark? Then, Jake tried not to think about it, but the question worried him more each day. 3 weeks had passed since Jake first found Spark. The small creature was now completely healed and full of energy. Its scales had grown brighter, and it had gained weight from Jake's shared meals. What surprised Jake most was how much Spark had learned during their time together. The creature could now respond to simple commands. When Jake said stay, Spark would sit and wait. When Jake pointed at something, Spark would look in that direction. Most amazing of all, Spark had started bringing Jake things it thought he needed. If Jake was working on electronics, Spark would fetch small tools. If Jake looked thirsty, Spark would nudge the water canteen toward him. But today was different. Today, Jake had to leave this site and move to the next atmospheric processor location. His supervisor had sent the coordinates that morning, along with a reminder that the terraforming schedule was behind plan. Jake stared at his packed equipment and felt a heavy weight in his chest. "I have to go, little friend," Jake said to Spark, who sat nearby watching him load the transport vehicle. "I wish I could take you with me, but where I am going might not be safe for you." Spark tilted its head and made a soft chirping sound. Jake had learned to recognize different sounds the creature made. This one usually meant confusion or sadness. Jake knelt down and gently stroked Spark's scales. "You belong here on your home planet. Maybe you have family somewhere looking for you." Jake's voice was rougher than usual. He had not expected saying goodbye to be so hard. Jake finished loading his equipment and performed his final checks on the atmospheric processor. The machine would continue working for months, slowly changing the air composition. The next team to visit this site would find air that was almost breathable. When Jake turned around, Spark was gone. He looked around the camp, calling softly, but the creature had disappeared into the crystal forest. Jake felt a stab of worry. What if Spark got lost again? What if it got hurt? But Jake knew he could not stay any longer. With a heavy heart, he climbed into his transport vehicle and started the engine. He drove slowly away from the camp, looking back several times, hoping to catch one last glimpse of his small friend. The journey to the next site took most of the day. Jake set up his new camp near another atmospheric processor, going through the familiar routine of establishing his temporary base. But everything felt empty without Spark's curious presence. As the alien sun began to set, Jake started his final equipment checks for the day. He was adjusting a sensor array when he felt the ground vibrate under his feet. At first, he thought it might be an earthquake. The vibrations had a rhythm, though, like very heavy footsteps. Jake grabbed his scanner and looked around nervously. The readings showed something large approaching from the direction of the crystal forest. Something much larger than Spark. Jake's hand moved to the emergency beacon on his belt, but he hesitated. What if this was just another harmless creature? The footsteps grew louder. Trees at the edge of the clearing swayed as something pushed through them. Jake's heart pounded as he realized how big whatever was coming had to be. He took a step back, toward his transport vehicle, ready to run if necessary. Then the creature emerged from the forest, and Jake's breath caught in his throat. She was magnificent. 8 feet tall, walking upright like a human, but with the grace of a great cat. Her body was covered in the same shimmering scales as Spark, but these were larger and more brilliant. They caught the setting sun and threw back colors Jake had no names for. Her form was humanoid, but clearly alien, with long limbs and a powerful build that spoke of both strength and elegance. Her head was more human-like than Spark's, though still distinctly alien. High cheekbones, a narrow nose, and those same large amber eyes, but in an adult face that radiated intelligence and authority. She had no hair, but raised ridges along her scalp formed patterns that looked almost like a crown. What shocked Jake most was what she carried. Riding on her broad shoulder, chittering excitedly, was Spark. The large alien female approached slowly, her movements careful and deliberate. She stopped about 20 feet away from Jake and studied him with those golden eyes. Jake could feel her intelligence like a physical presence. This was no simple animal. This was a thinking being, probably more advanced than humans. Spark jumped down from her shoulder and ran toward Jake, making happy chirping sounds. The creature rubbed against Jake's legs like an affectionate cat, then ran back to the female alien and chittered at her, as if telling her something important. The female alien listened to Spark's sounds, nodding slowly. Then she looked back at Jake and did something unexpected. She placed her hand over her heart and bowed her head slightly. It was clearly a gesture of respect or gratitude. Jake felt like he was in a dream. First contact with an intelligent alien species, and it was happening to him, alone on a remote planet. He tried to remember his training about alien encounters, but his mind was blank. All he could think about was how beautiful and impressive this being was. The alien female reached into what looked like a pouch on her side and pulled out a device Jake did not recognize. It was made of the same crystal material as the forest trees, but clearly crafted by intelligent hands. She touched something on its surface, and it began to glow with soft blue light. She spoke, and Jake heard her voice for the first time. It was deep and musical, with sounds no human throat could make. But somehow, Jake understood that she was trying to communicate with him. She gestured at Spark, then at Jake, then placed her hand over her heart again. Jake realized she was thanking him for helping Spark, probably for saving the creature's life. He felt heat rise in his cheeks and gestured awkwardly, trying to show that it was no big deal. But clearly, to her, it was a very big deal indeed. The alien female approached closer, moving with predatory grace. She was even more impressive up close. Jake could see that her scales had intricate patterns, and her amber eyes held depths of intelligence that made him feel like she could see right through him. She extended one long-fingered hand toward Jake, palm up. Her claws were retracted, and the gesture seemed peaceful. Jake hesitated for a moment, then reached out and gently touched her palm with his own hand. Her skin was warm and smooth, with a texture like fine leather. At the moment of contact, Jake felt something he could not explain. A sense of connection, of understanding that went beyond words. This alien being was not just intelligent. She was someone important, someone powerful in whatever society she came from. She spoke again, and this time Jake caught what sounded like a name in the musical flow of her words. She pointed to herself and repeated the sound. Jake tried to copy it, though his human vocal cords could not quite manage all the tones. "Zara?" Jake said, making his best attempt at the name. The alien female's eyes widened slightly, and she nodded. Then she pointed at Jake with a questioning look. "Jake," he said, pointing to himself. "My name is Jake." Zara tried to repeat his name, and Jake was amazed at how quickly she picked up the human sounds. Her version of Jake had an exotic accent, but it was clearly recognizable. As the last light faded from the sky, Jake realized that his life had just changed forever. The next morning, Jake woke to find Zara sitting near his camp, watching the sunrise. She had not left during the night, though Jake had wondered if she might disappear like a dream. Spark was curled up next to her, still sleeping peacefully. Zara turned when she heard Jake moving around his camp. She studied him with those intelligent amber eyes, and Jake felt like she was seeing more than just his physical appearance. There was something almost hypnotic about her gaze. Jake offered her some of his breakfast rations, but Zara shook her head politely. Instead, she reached into her pouch and pulled out what looked like fruit. It was purple and glowed faintly with its own light. She bit into it and offered some to Jake. Jake hesitated. Eating alien food could be dangerous, but Zara was clearly trying to share with him, just as he had shared with Spark. He took a small piece and tasted it carefully. It was sweet and tangy, with a flavor unlike anything from Earth. More importantly, it did not seem to hurt him. After breakfast, Zara began showing Jake things that amazed him. She pulled out the crystal device again and touched its surface in different patterns. Each time, it displayed different images that floated in the air above it. Jake saw pictures of underground cities with beautiful architecture that blended natural caves with advanced technology. One image showed beings like Zara and Spark living in harmony with their environment. There were gardens that grew without soil, using only light and water. There were machines that cleaned the air and water without making any noise or waste. Jake realized he was looking at a civilization far more advanced than humanity. Zara seemed to understand Jake's amazement. She touched another pattern on her device, and the images changed to show the planet's surface. But these were not current pictures. These showed the same crystal forests, but with cities above ground too. Then the images changed to show destruction. War, fire, death. Jake understood. Zara was showing him the history of her people. They had once lived on the surface, but something terrible had happened. A war that forced them underground. Now they hid beneath the planet, rebuilding their civilization in secret. But why was she showing him this? Jake pointed to himself, and then to the images, trying to ask what this meant for humans. Zara's expression grew serious. She showed him new images on her device. These pictures showed human ships arriving at the planet. Jake saw his own people setting up the atmospheric processors. But he also saw Zara's people watching from hidden places. They had been observing human activities from the beginning. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. All this time he had thought he was alone on this planet. But Zara's people had been watching him, studying him, learning about humanity. The question was, what did they plan to do with that knowledge? Zara seemed to sense his worry. She touched his arm gently and spoke in her musical language. Though Jake could not understand the words, her tone was reassuring. She was trying to tell him that her people meant no harm. And Zara did something that shocked Jake completely. She picked up a stick and began drawing in the dirt. Her pictures were simple but clear. She drew the human atmospheric processors, then drew her people's underground machines. The two systems were connected, working together. Jake stared at the drawings in amazement. Zara was telling him that the human terraforming efforts were actually helping her people too. The atmospheric processors were not just making air for future human colonists. They were also helping restore the planet's environment for the original inhabitants. But that meant Zara's people had known about the human terraforming project before it even started. They had allowed it, maybe even wanted it. Jake looked up at Zara with new respect. Her people were not just advanced technologically. They were smart enough to turn a potential invasion into a benefit for everyone. Zara continued drawing. She showed Jake pictures of humans and her people working together, sharing knowledge, building a better world for both species. But then her expression grew troubled. She drew other figures, ones that looked angry and afraid. She pointed to these figures and shook her head sadly. Jake understood. Not everyone in Zara's society agreed with the idea of cooperating with humans. Some of her people probably wanted to drive the humans away, or worse. Zara was taking a big risk by revealing herself to him. As the day went on, Zara taught Jake simple words in her language while learning more human words herself. She was incredibly quick at picking up languages. Jake suspected that her people were natural linguists, probably because they had to learn to communicate with many different species. The translation became easier when Zara brought out another device. This one was smaller and seemed to analyze their speech patterns. Within a few hours, it was providing rough translations of their conversation. Jake was amazed by the technology, which was far beyond anything humans had developed. Through the translation device, Jake learned that Zara was not just any member of her society. She was something like a scientist and an architect responsible for designing the underground cities. She was also a member of their ruling council, which explained why she carried herself with such authority. More importantly, Jake learned that Spark was not just any young member of their species. Spark was Zara's own offspring, her child. When Spark had wandered away from their underground home and gotten lost on the surface, Zara had been frantic with worry. Finding her child safe and healthy, cared for by a kind human, had changed her entire perspective on Jake's species. "Your people judge individuals by their actions," Zara said through the translation device. "This is wise. Many species judge all members by the actions of a few." Jake felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. He was representing all of humanity in Zara's eyes. His treatment of Spark had convinced her that humans could be trusted and compassionate. But what would happen when other humans arrived at this planet? As if reading his thoughts, Zara grew serious again. She explained that her people had been watching human terraforming teams on several worlds. Most of the time, humans showed respect for the environment and local life forms. But there had been some incidents that worried her people. Some humans seemed to care only about profit and power. "My people must decide soon," Zara said. "Do we reveal ourselves to your species, or do we remain hidden? Your kindness to Spark speaks well for humanity, but one good human does not represent all humans." Jake felt the pressure of that statement. Somehow, his simple act of feeding a starving creature had put him at the center of a decision that could change the course of both civilizations. If Zara's people decided humans were a threat, they had the technology to make life very difficult for human colonists. If they decided humans were potential allies, both species could benefit enormously. That evening, as they sat around Jake's small campfire, Zara made an offer that left Jake speechless. She invited him to visit her underground city, to meet her. people and see their civilization firsthand. It would be the first time in centuries that an outsider had been allowed into their hidden realm. "This is a great honor," Zara explained, "but also a great risk. If my people decide you cannot be trusted, you may not be allowed to leave. Are you willing to take that chance?" Jake looked at Zara's beautiful alien face in the firelight. He thought about Spark, sleeping peacefully between them. He thought about the amazing technology he had seen, and the possibility of cooperation between their species. Most of all, he thought about the growing connection he felt with this remarkable being who had risked everything to make contact with. "Him, yes," Jake said quietly. "I'll come with you." Zara's amber eyes reflected the firelight as she smiled, and Jake felt his heart skip a beat. Whatever happened next, his life would never be the same. The entrance to Zara's underground city was hidden so well that Jake would never have found it on his own. What looked like a natural crack in the rock face opened into a smooth tunnel that sloped gently downward. Bioluminescent plants growing along the walls provided soft, blue-green light that was easy on the eyes. Jake followed Zara and Spark through the tunnel, amazed by what he saw. The walls were not just carved rock. They were lined with the same crystal material he had seen in the forest, but here it had been shaped and polished into beautiful patterns. The crystals hummed quietly with energy, probably powering the lighting. And air circulation systems. As they went deeper, the tunnel opened into larger chambers. Jake saw his first glimpse of Zara's people's architecture, and it took his breath away. The spaces were vast, but felt comfortable, with curved walls that followed the natural shape of the rock formations. Everything was smooth and organic, as if the buildings had grown rather than been built. Other members of Zara's species began appearing as they walked through the tunnels. They were all tall and graceful like Zara, though Jake noticed differences in their scale patterns and coloring. Some had scales that were more blue or green, while others had patterns of silver and gold. All of them stopped to stare at Jake with obvious curiosity. Jake felt self-conscious under their gaze. He was clearly the first human any of them had ever seen in person. Some of their expressions seemed friendly, but others looked worried or suspicious. Jake stayed close to Zara, grateful for her protective presence. Spark seemed completely at home in the underground city. The young creature ran ahead, greeting other members of their species with happy chirping sounds. Jake realized that Spark had probably been missed by many friends and family members during the time it was lost on the surface. Zara led Jake through what seemed like a main plaza. The ceiling here was so high that Jake could barely see it in the dim light. In the center of the space was a garden unlike anything Jake had ever imagined. Plants grew in impossible spirals, reaching toward the ceiling, their leaves glowing with their own light. Water flowed in streams that seemed to defy gravity, creating fountains that hung in the air. "This is our heart chamber," Zara explained, through her translation device. "Here we gather for important ceremonies and decisions. My people call it the place of growing light." Jake understood why. The entire space seemed alive with gentle energy. He could feel it in the air, in the humming of the crystals, in the way the plants moved, even though there was no wind. This was not just advanced technology. This was something that blended science with art and nature in a way humans had never achieved. They continued deeper into the city, and Jake saw more wonders. Workshops where Zara's people crafted tools and devices from living crystal. Libraries where knowledge was stored in glowing spheres that could project information directly into the viewer's mind. Living spaces that adjusted their temperature and lighting automatically based on the occupant's needs. But what impressed Jake most was how everything worked together. There was no waste, no pollution, no noise. The city felt like a single living organism, with every part supporting the whole. Jake thought about human cities, with their traffic and smog and garbage, and felt embarrassed by the comparison. Zara brought him to what appeared to be her own living space. It was carved into the wall of a large chamber with windows that looked out over the underground gardens. The furniture was grown rather than built, shaped from the same crystal material, but softened somehow to be comfortable for living beings. "You will stay here while you visit us," Zara said. "My home has space for guests, and I can ensure your safety better if you remain close to me." Jake felt his face grow warm. Living in Zara's home felt incredibly intimate, especially given the strange attraction he had been feeling toward her. But he also understood the practical reasons. As the only human in a city of aliens, he would need protection from those who might not trust his presence. That evening, Zara took Jake to meet the city's ruling council. The chamber where they gathered was ancient, with walls covered in carvings that told the history of Zara's people. The council members were all elderly, their scales having taken on deeper, richer colors with age. Their amber eyes held the wisdom of centuries. The council leader, who introduced himself as Elder Keth, spoke to Jake through a larger version of Zara's translation device. His voice was deep and formal, carrying the weight of authority. "Human Jake," Elder Keth said, "you have done our people a great service by saving young Spark. But your presence here creates difficult questions for us. For many generations we have hidden from the surface world. Some of us believe this is still the wisest path." Jake felt nervous under the elder's intense gaze, but he tried to speak honestly. "I understand your caution, Elder Keth. My people have not always been wise in how we treat other species, but I believe we can learn to do better. Working together, both our peoples could accomplish amazing things." Another council member, an elderly female with silver scales, spoke up. "The humans strip resources from worlds and move on. They poison the air and water with their machines. Why should we trust a species that destroys its own home planet?" Jake felt a sting of shame because he knew there was truth in her words. But he also thought about all the good things humans had done. "You're right that we've made mistakes," he said. "But humans also have the ability to change and grow. We've learned to take better care of our environment. We've developed cleaner technologies. And when we see suffering, many of us feel compelled to help, even if it costs us something." Elder Keth nodded thoughtfully. "Zara has told us how you cared for Spark despite the risk to yourself. This speaks well of your character. But one human cannot represent an entire species." Over the following days, Jake worked alongside Zara and her people, helping with various projects around the city. He was amazed by how much he could contribute despite the vast technological differences. His human perspective often led to solutions that Zara's people had not considered. When the city's water purification system developed a problem, Jake suggested a simple filtration method he remembered from his engineering training. The technique was primitive compared to their crystal-based technology, but it worked as a backup system until the main repairs were completed. When a section of the underground gardens was not growing properly, Jake noticed that the problem was similar to soil chemistry issues he had dealt with during terraforming work. His suggestions helped restore the plants to health. Most importantly, Jake helped design improvements to the atmospheric processors on the surface. Working with Zara, he found ways to make the human machines work even better with the underground city's environmental systems. The collaboration was so successful that both the surface and underground environments began improving faster than anyone had expected. As they worked together, Jake found himself drawn more and more to Zara. She was brilliant, kind, and dedicated to her people's welfare. Her exotic beauty was impossible to ignore, but it was her mind and heart that truly captivated him. He caught himself staring at her often, admiring the way her scales caught the light or the graceful way she moved. Jake was not sure if Zara felt the same attraction, but he noticed that she seemed to enjoy his company. She would sit closer to him than necessary, during their work sessions. She would touch his arm when making a point in conversation. Sometimes he caught her looking at him with an expression he could not quite interpret. The growing connection between them did not go unnoticed by other members of the city. Some seemed pleased by the friendship between human and Zephyrian. Others appeared concerned about what such a relationship might mean for their society. One evening, as Jake and Zara worked late in her laboratory, she turned to him with a serious expression. "Jake," she said quietly, "there is something I must tell you. The council will make their decision about your people soon. Some members are impressed by what you have shown us. Others remain fearful. The choice they make will affect the future of both our species." Jake felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders again. Everything depended on convincing Zara's people that humans could be trusted partners rather than dangerous invaders. "What can I do to help?" Jake asked. Zara's amber eyes met his, and Jake saw something in them that made his heart race. "You have already done more than you know," she said softly. "You have shown me that there can be understanding between our kinds. Perhaps even something deeper than understanding." The air between them seemed charged with electricity. Jake wanted to reach out and touch her face, to tell her how he felt about her. But he held back, knowing that the future of two civilizations hung in the balance of the decisions being made around them. Jake had been living in the underground city for 2 weeks when the emergency sirens started wailing. The sound was different from anything he had heard before, a deep harmonic note that seemed to come from the crystal walls themselves. Zara rushed into the laboratory where Jake was working, her amber eyes wide with concern. "Human ships have arrived at the planet," she said quickly. "They are searching for you. Your people believe you are missing or dead." Jake felt his stomach drop. He had been so caught up in the wonder of Zara's civilization that he had forgotten about his regular check-in schedule. His supervisor would have sent a search team when Jake failed to report in. Now human military ships were probably scanning the planet, looking for signs of what had happened to him. "How long before they find the city?" Jake asked. "Our shielding. Technology will hide us from their sensors," Zara replied. "But they will not leave until they find you or discover what happened to you. This forces our council to make their decisions sooner than planned." Within an hour, Jake found himself standing before the full council in the ancient chamber. All the city's leaders were present, their faces grave with the weight of the choice they had to make. Elder Keth spoke first, his deep voice echoing off the carved walls. "The presence of human military vessels changes everything," he said. "We can no longer take time to slowly consider options. We must decide now whether to reveal ourselves or to ensure that knowledge of our existence dies with you." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. The elder was talking about killing him to protect their secret. He looked at Zara, who stood with the other council members, but kept her eyes fixed on him. Her expression was calm, but Jake could see the tension in her posture. "Before we vote," Zara said, stepping forward, "I wish to present additional evidence for why we should make contact with humanity." She activated her crystal device, and images appeared in the air above it. These were recordings from Jake's time in the city, showing him working alongside Zara's people. The council watched as Jake helped solve technical problems, shared his engineering knowledge, and treated everyone with respect and kindness. "This human has proven that his species can be valuable partners," Zara said. "His different perspective has improved our technology in ways we had not imagined. His compassion toward Spark shows that humans are capable of caring for other species. I believe we have more to gain from cooperation than from continued hiding." Elder Keth nodded thoughtfully. "Your words carry weight, Zara, but one good human does not guarantee the goodness of an entire species. What if the humans who are searching for him prove less trustworthy?" Jake knew this was his moment to speak. The future of two civilizations depended on what he said next. He thought about everything he had learned during his time in the underground city and about his growing feelings for Zara. Elder Keth, honored council members, Jake began. I understand your fear. My species has made terrible mistakes in the past. We have destroyed environments, fought wars over resources, and sometimes treated other life forms as less important than ourselves. But we have also shown the ability to learn and change. Jake gestured toward the images still floating in the air. You have seen how your technology and our methods can work together to create something better than either could achieve alone. Imagine what we could accomplish if our entire civilizations cooperated. Humans could learn from your wisdom about living in harmony with nature. Your people could benefit from our adaptability and our different ways of solving problems. One of the younger council members spoke up. But what guarantee do we have that other humans will be as trustworthy as you? You don't, Jake admitted. Just as I had no guarantee that Spark would not bite me when I tried to help. Sometimes trust has to start with one person taking a risk for another. I took that risk when I fed a starving creature. Zara took that risk when she revealed herself to me. Now I am asking you to take that risk with my entire species. The council debated for hours while Jake waited in Zara's chambers. He could hear the distant sound of human ships in orbit, their sensors sweeping the planet's surface. His people were probably worried about him, maybe even planning a ground search. Time was running out. Finally, Zara returned with news. The council had reached a decision, but it was not unanimous. They would attempt first contact with the human search team, but with strict conditions. Jake would serve as intermediary, and Zara would be the primary spokesperson for her people. If the initial contact went badly, the Zephyrians would retreat underground and ensure that no human ever found them again. This is an enormous risk for my people, Zara told Jake as they prepared for the surface journey. If your species proves untrustworthy, we may have to abandon this city and move to deeper tunnels. Generations of work could be lost. Jake felt the weight of that responsibility, but he also felt hope. I believe in both our species, he said. I think this could be the beginning of something amazing. Zara looked at him with those beautiful amber eyes. I hope you are right, Jake Morrison, because I find myself caring more about this outcome than I should. The moment hung between them, charged with unspoken feelings. Jake reached out and gently touched Zara's hand. Her scales were warm and smooth under his fingers. I care about the outcome too, Jake said quietly, and not just because of our species. I care because of you. Zara's eyes widened slightly, and Jake saw his own feelings reflected there. Despite all the differences between them, despite the vast space between their worlds, something deep and real had grown between them. The first contact meeting took place in a clearing near Jake's original camp. Jake emerged from the crystal forest, accompanied by Zara, Elder Keth, and several other Zephyrian representatives. The human search team, led by Commander Lisa Martinez, was clearly shocked to see Jake alive and accompanied by tall, graceful aliens. What followed was the most important conversation in human history. Jake served as translator and cultural bridge, helping both sides understand each other's concerns and capabilities. Commander Martinez was a good choice for first contact. She was intelligent, diplomatic, and open-minded enough to recognize the incredible opportunity that Zara's people represented. The negotiations lasted for days. There were misunderstandings and moments of tension, but gradually trust began to build. The Zephyrians shared some of their environmental technology, while the humans offered medical supplies and communication equipment. Small gestures of goodwill grew into larger agreements. The breakthrough came when Spark, now fully grown and healthy, appeared during one of the meetings. The young Zephyrian remembered Jake and greeted him with obvious affection. Seeing the bond between human and alien child helped convince both sides that cooperation was not only possible but natural. 3 months later, Jake stood in the newly constructed joint research facility that bridged the surface and underground worlds. Human and Zephyrian scientists worked side by side, sharing knowledge and solving problems together. The atmospheric processors had been upgraded with Zephyrian biotechnology, making the terraforming process faster and more environmentally friendly. More importantly for Jake, his relationship with Zara had grown into something beautiful and deep. They worked together as co-directors of the research facility, combining human engineering with Zephyrian environmental science. Their partnership had become a symbol of cooperation between the two species. As Jake watched human children playing with young Zephyrians in the facility's garden, he thought about how far they had all come. It had started with a simple act of compassion toward a lost, hungry creature. Now it had grown into an alliance that would change both civilizations forever. Zara appeared beside him, her presence as warm and comforting as always. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. Jake smiled and put his arm around her shoulders, marveling as always at how perfectly she fit against him, despite their biological differences. "I was thinking about Spark," he said, "and how feeding one small creature led to all of Vol. Bis." Zara leaned into his embrace. "My people have a saying," she said, "small kindnesses grow into great changes." You proved that saying true. As the alien sun set over their shared world, Jake knew that his simple choice to help a starving creature had indeed grown into something greater than he could ever have imagined. The future stretched ahead of them, full of challenges and possibilities. But whatever came next, they would face it together.